Let me tell you the story about this demon lady named Jahy. She used to be a big shot in the Dark Realm, all powerful and beautiful, and was the right-hand gal to the Dark Lord. Life was good until this pesky magical girl showed up and wrecked everything by breaking the mana crystal. Suddenly, Jahy finds herself stuck in the human world, looking like a little kid. Now, Jahy lives in this crummy apartment without a proper bath, and it really ticks her off. She reminisces about her glory days, where she had authority in magic, and longs to restore the Dark Realm. But for now, she's got to make a living, so she scarfs down some bean sprouts and uses a tiny mana crystal to temporarily regain her original form. Jahy works at this small tavern as a waitress, and it annoys her to no end. She has to use her remaining magic for the job, even though she'd rather be using it for something else. Plus, she can't stand serving humans and hates that they don't give her the respect she deserves. Her boss shows up, praising her for her work and telling her to smile more. But it just embarrasses Jahy even more. She takes a break, hoping to hold onto her magic until she gets home. But of course, things go wrong. Her magic fizzles out, and she turns back into a little girl. Jahy panics because if her boss sees her, she'll get fired. But when the boss walks in, she's surprisingly excited. Jahy tries to scare her by saying she's a powerful being from the Dark Realm, but instead the boss thinks she can handle fiery stoves. It's like the boss doesn't even fear her. Frustrated, Jahy grabs a fork and tries to attack her, but the boss just hugs her instead. She comforts Jahy and even gives her more money for her work. To top it off, she sends her home early with some food. The next day, the landlord comes to collect the rent, and Jahy refuses to pay. She argues with the landlord, saying the place is a dump and not worth the money. The landlord threatens to kick her out, but Jahy doesn't want to end up living in a cardboard house by the river again. She agrees to pay in 2 days, but the landlord doesn't trust her since she made the same promise last month and skipped out. Jahy tries to act like she's starving and can't afford the rent, but the landlord sees through her lies. Desperate to escape the situation, Jahy pretends her boss is nearby. The landlord, scared of the boss, lets Jahy go, trying to explain she was just doing her job. As Jahy runs away, thinking she's safe, she realizes the landlord is still chasing her and demanding the rent. They all end up running into the boss, who scolds both of them. The landlord blames Jahy for not paying, and the boss convinces Jahy to cough up the cash. Jahy admits defeat but promises not to pay next month, which reignites their argument. Now, Jahy needs to find her mana crystal, which has somehow gone missing. She thinks it might be at work, so she heads over there. The boss is surprised to see her on her day off, especially in her little form. Jahy explains that she's desperately searching for a small red stone, and she asks the boss for help. To her relief, the boss reveals that she found the stone and thought it belonged to Jahy. She even wore it so she wouldn't forget to give it back. Jahy is thrilled to have her stone back, but wonders how long the boss had been wearing it. Turns out the boss had it on for a whole day, and Jahy explains that the stone brings misfortune when in human hands. But nothing major seems to have happened, making Jahy question if her stone is weak. The stone is essential to her, because it helps her transform into her original form. Jahy is about to thank the boss but stops herself, claiming misfortune will come her way, and she leaves. The boss recalls that when she found the crystal, she tried to transform with it on and ended up hitting her knee when her sister saw her. She wonders if it's all because of the crystal's misfortune, but is too embarrassed to tell Jahy about it. Jahy couldn't handle the scorching heat and was determined to find a mana crystal to restore the Dark Realm. In between her shifts at work, she searched every nook and cranny of the city, hoping to stumble upon those precious crystals. The reaction of her mana crystal indicated that a larger piece could be found somewhere in the city. Following the crystal's guidance, she ended up outside a fancy jewelry store. Her eyes widened when she saw a diamond ring worth a whopping 2 million yen. She couldn't even begin to calculate how long it would take her to save up that kind of money. To her dismay, just as she was contemplating it, she witnessed the ring being sold to someone else. Moments later, a familiar face emerged from the store. It was Druge, someone Jahy used to test her weapons on and treated as a servant back in the Dark Realm. Taking a moment to recall, Jahy recognized Druge and they exchanged greetings. Druge had changed her appearance and now went by the name Dojima. She explained that after the Dark Realm fell, she lost track of everyone and their whereabouts. Nevertheless, she was happy to see Jahy again. Dojima noticed Jahy's current form and the scarcity of mana shards on her. She wondered why Jahy looked like that, suggesting that maybe she did it intentionally to manipulate the sympathies of foolish humans. Dojima applauded Jahy for her brilliant plan. Just then, the woman from the jewelry store came out, and Dojima asked her to deliver the gem to her address. Dojima then invited Jahy for tea at a luxurious place. As they perused the menu, Jahy was taken aback by the exorbitant prices and settled for just water. Dojima wondered if nothing on the menu appealed to her. Jahy retorted, saying that Dojima clearly didn't understand her status and fame in the Dark Realm. Dojima, thinking jahy was worried about being poisoned due to her fame, assured her that she had already checked the food for any harm. When Dojima's order arrived, jahy couldn't help but drool over the delicious-looking dish. Dojima offered her a bite, mentioning that she had confirmed it was safe. But at the last moment, she playfully pulled away the spoon, remembering that jahy had said she would never eat anything touched by Dojima. After tea, while in Dojima's car, jahy pondered if Dojima had been in the jewelry store looking for mana crystals. Dojima denied it, stating that it was highly unlikely for a human store to sell something like that. Jahy pretended that she knew that all along and was just testing Dojima. Curious about where jahy lived, Dojima offered to drop her off. However, jahy, embarrassed by her shabby place, declined, claiming she couldn't reveal her main base of operations since she was working on restoring the Dark Realm. Later, following the reaction of her mana crystal, jahy arrived at a tall building. Assuming there must be a larger crystal there, she began climbing the building. To her surprise, Dojima spotted her. Jahy questioned Dojima's motives, asking her what she wanted. Dojima chuckled, stating that jahy must know why she was there. Jahy was about to claim that she had found the big crystal first, but Dojima revealed that she actually lived in that building and invited jahy inside. Jahy found herself enjoying Dojima's place, even though Dojima believed it paled in comparison to jahy's place. While they are chatting, something brushed against jahy's leg, and she assumed it was Dojima's familiar. However, Dojima clarified that it was just a cleaning robot. Jahy tried to play it off, relating the robot to a familiar since familiars were responsible for cleaning in the Dark Realm. As Dojima continued discussing expensive and useful electronics, jahy can't take it anymore and decided to scold her for taking delight in human inventions. As Dojima feels down, jahy notices mana crystals and decides to take them. As jahy takes a mana crystal and states the crystals are now hers, and she mustn't depend that much on human inventions. The alarm goes off and a cage falls on jahy, capturing her. Dojima is moved that jahy sacrificed herself to show her that her anti-theft system isn't enough. As thanks, Dojima gives her a plate set, which disappoints jahy as she wanted something she could eat. Undeterred, jahy decided to head into the mountains to search for more crystals. She delved deeper into the wilderness until she eventually got lost. Despite the situation, she remained calm, knowing she could use her crystal to guide her back to Dojima. However, just then, a mischievous crow snatched her crystal and flew away. Now unsure of what to do, jahy found herself caught in a downpour. As she waited for the rain to stop, her food supply dwindled, and she grew colder. Realizing she needed to keep moving, she attempted to do so but ended up slipping and twisting her ankle. She believed it was the end for her. However, her attention was captured by a small chick that had fallen from its nest. Seeing herself in the helpless creature, jahy decided to help and return it to its nest. Despite the struggle, she managed to climb the tree and reunite the chick with its family. It was then that she noticed her crystal, and an even larger one in the nest. Seizing the opportunity, she grabbed them, but a branch snapped, leaving her hanging perilously. To her surprise, the landlord appeared, wondering what jahy was up to. Jahy couldn't fathom how she ended up so deep in the woods, but the landlord revealed that they were right behind jahy's apartment building. With the landlord's assistance, jahy was safely brought down. Observing her injured leg, the landlord kindly offered to carry jahy. Annoyed by a human showing her pity, jahy reluctantly accepted. As the landlord carried her, jahy admitted that she might owe her one, but she still wouldn't pay her rent. Once upon a time in the Dark Realm, jahy was a force to be reckoned with. Everyone feared and respected her. She had the power to blast anyone who dared defy her into tiny pieces. On this particular day, jahy was in high spirits. She had managed to acquire a bigger mana crystal, which made her feel more agile and energetic at work. She proudly wore it around her neck, expecting her boss to be amazed and shower her with admiration. However, to her annoyance, the boss told her to take it off, claiming it was interfering with her work. Jahy couldn't believe it. She explained that with such a large mana crystal, she wouldn't need to transform into her kid form and could continue working until the very end. Surprisingly, the boss agreed and asked her to stay until closing time. As the day drew to a close, jahy couldn't help but question why she was even working. She had obtained the crystal not to maintain her form for work, but to restore the Dark Realm. Just then, the boss thanked her, expressing gratitude for her staying until the last order. Flattered, jahy declared that she wasn't done and could still keep working. The boss then assigned her the task of cleaning the drain in the sink. Shocked, jahy hesitated for a moment, but the boss guessed that even with her mighty mana crystal, she wouldn't be able to do it. Determined to prove her wrong, jahy used her mana crystal to clean the drain, leaving the boss impressed. But the challenges didn't end there. The boss asked jahy to clean the grease on the stove hood, remove the cigarette smell, and clean the trays. As jahy completed each task, she grew more and more annoyed. She realized that she shouldn't be wasting her crystal's power on such trivial matters. She explained to the boss that the mana crystals were capable of much more, and her ultimate goal was to restore the Dark Realm. Jahy even threatened that she could use the crystal to harm the boss. In a surprising turn of events, Jahy transformed back into her kid form, shocking the boss. It turned out that even a mana crystal of that size had run out of magic, and Jahy blamed the boss for making her waste it on useless tasks. As it was late and Jahy looked like a child, the boss kindly offered to give her a ride home. However, Jahy was annoyed by being treated like a child and believed that the boss couldn't possibly understand the greatness of her mana crystal. Jahy recalled that Dojima, an acquaintance from the Dark Realm, might be the one who could appreciate her crystal. She invited Dojima for tea the next day. Showing off her crystal, Jahy asked Dojima about her progress in finding mana crystals. Dojima shared that it wasn't going well, which secretly delighted Jahy. Dojima complimented Jahy on the size and magnificence of her crystal, making Jahy very happy. Dojima speculated that obtaining such a large crystal must have been a challenging feat. Jahy acted nonchalantly, claiming that it was nothing for someone like her. With the Dark Realm destroyed, Dojima believed that Jahy could become the strongest demon, sparking Jahy's excitement. Jahy went on to describe her adventure of finding the crystal, embellishing the story to make it sound more impressive. Dojima was thrilled and regretted not being there to witness Jahy's victory. Jahy further embellished the tale, claiming that the monster she defeated had a brood, all of which she annihilated. When she inspected the nest, she found the crystal. Dojima expressed relief that Jahy hadn't changed, as she feared Jahy might have changed along with her new form. Dojima also felt a bit embarrassed about her own meager collection of mana crystals compared to Jahy's. She showed Jahy a picture of her small collection and mentioned that she only managed to collect a truckload of crystals that month, which shocked Jahy. Hearing that Dojima used them as decorations at home, Jahy couldn't help but cry tears of joy over her own tiny crystal. The next day, Jahy went to work, and as she opened the pub, she happened to encounter Dojima passing by. Not wanting Dojima to know that she was working for a human, Jahy quickly came up with a story. She claimed that Pub Mao was hers, and that she used it to gather information about crystals and make money from humans. Dojima was amazed that Jahy not only aspired to rule the Dark Realm, but also had ambitions in the human world. Intrigued, she expressed her desire to check out the place. However, Jahy pretended it was closed. Just then, the boss came out and warmly welcomed Dojima, referring to Jahy as He-chan. This angered Dojima, but Jahy quickly intervened, explaining that her name was too flashy, so she ordered Dojima to call her P-chan. Dojima introduced herself, and the boss also claimed to be the owner, but Jahy interrupted, stating that she was just an employee. Secretly, Jahy silently begged the boss to play along and pretend that she was the owner. Inside the pub, Jahy took Dojima's order. As she brought her some food and beer, Dojima thoroughly enjoyed it, proclaiming it to be the most delicious food she had eaten since coming to the human world. Jahy insisted that it was her treat and encouraged Dojima to keep ordering. She even recommended some dishes that Dojima ended up really enjoying. As Jahy listened to Dojima's compliments, she couldn't help but wonder if she was working, because she enjoyed hearing people praise her. After Dojima finished her meal and left, Jahy told her she was welcome to come back any time. The boss then handed Jahy the bill, shocking her with its total amount, equivalent to 3 days' pay. Later, as Jahy washed the dishes, she couldn't help but feel happy and satisfied seeing how much Dojima had eaten. So before the Dark Realm went down the drain, Sorva had this obsession with defeating Jahy and taking her place as the second in command. She tried countless times, but luck was never on her side, and she always ended up losing due to some unfortunate mishaps. Even after the Dark Realm fell, Sorva still believed she was smarter and more deserving of that number 2 spot. She saw it as the perfect opportunity to finally beat Jahy, snatch her manga crystal, and restore the Dark Realm. Now, Sorva needed to find Jahy, and to her surprise, she stumbled upon her pretty quickly. She thought she had the upper hand, preparing to attack Jahy from behind. But before she could strike, Jahy exclaimed that she was ready for the attack. Sorva was taken aback, wondering how Jahy managed to notice her. However, in reality, Jahy was just talking to a dog. Undeterred, Sorva decided to take her magic amplifying potion, which she spent 3 long months brewing. With this potion, she was confident she'd become super strong and finally take on Jahy. As she was about to gulp it down, Jahy unexpectedly announced that she was leaving, catching Sorva off guard. In her surprise, Sorva dropped her precious potion, and it shattered into pieces. She was devastated, but determined to defeat Jahy, she considered doing anything, even licking the potion off the ground. But right at that moment, a dog came along and started lapping up the potion. Sorva tried to stop it, but the potion started to have an effect on the dog, turning it into a giant-sized house pet. The dog pinned Sorva down and began giving her an unexpected licking frenzy, allowing Jahy to make her escape. The next day, Sorva finally finished concocting her transform into anything pill. Knowing that Jahy always had a bunch of underlings around her, Sorva thought it'd be the same in the human world. So she planned to transform into jahy and deliberately make a fool of herself in front of those underlings. Sorva believed this would make them find jahy lame and ruin her reputation for good. She took the pill by the riverside and saw her reflection in the water. Voila, it worked. Just then, the landlord showed up, mistaking Sorva for jahy and reminding her about the upcoming rent. Intent on ruining jahy's reputation, Sorva boldly declared she wasn't going to pay. The landlord got annoyed, clearly used to jahy's antics, which made Sorva realize that jahy usually didn't pay her rent. She awkwardly explained that she didn't have any money, but seeing the terrifying look on the landlord's face, she got scared and ended up coughing up the cash, surprising the landlord with jahy's sudden obedience. As Sorva strolled around, she found herself in front of the Mao pub. The boss told her she was early but still let her in. Thinking she was just a regular customer, Sorva confidently plopped herself at a table and demanded juice, fully planning on skipping out on the tab. But the boss found it amusing and insisted that Sorva put on her work clothes instead. So Sorva ended up serving in the pub and helping out the customers. When she took a break, the boss praised her for doing a good job and being extra attentive to the customers' needs. Sorva suddenly realized that she had inadvertently improved jahy's reputation instead of ruining it, and this made her tear up. Before heading home, the boss even packed some leftover food for Sorva. Sorva started thinking that she should visit the place in her regular form sometime. However, she then began to wonder if this was all part of jahy's trap, since jahy didn't show up that evening. Little did she know, jahy was actually just oversleeping at home. With a measly 306 yen in her pocket, no food, and a whole week until payday, jahy was at a loss for what to do. She needed time to search for mana crystals, but her adult form didn't last long, so she couldn't take on more work shifts. Desperate to find a way to make money without working, she decided to gather information. Jahy headed to the market, but got distracted by someone selling fried croquettes and ended up impulsively buying one, realizing afterward that she had spent 100 yen. She approached a woman, hoping to learn an easy money-making method, but the woman had no clue. Frustrated, Jahy spent another 100 yen on a sukun skewer. Annoyed with herself for spending again, she found solace in the delicious food. She approached another person, but this time it was a meat bun vendor, and she ended up spending another 100 yen on a bun. With only 6 yen left, Jahy was disappointed in herself for coming out to make money, but only managing to spend it. Back at work, Jahy wasn't performing her best due to her hunger. The boss heard about it and scolded her, emphasizing the importance of planning how to use her money wisely. The boss mentioned that if Jahy had told her earlier, she could have paid her in advance, but it was a one-time exception. Jahy was surprised that such an option existed and started crying out of gratitude. So on the next day, Jahy was working her butt off at the job, and the boss mentioned something about making her the shift lead, the one with all the power. Jahy's mind immediately went wild, imagining herself surrounded by minions, doing her bidding. But then the boss remembered that Jahy was the only employee, so being the shift lead didn't really make sense. After a long day, Jahy headed home, hoping for some peace and quiet. But just as she was about to reach her doorstep, a police officer stopped her. Apparently there were reports of a strangely dressed person, and they wanted to know what Jahy was doing there. Now, seeing a police officer was like a trigger for Jahy. They had caught her many times before when she was searching for mana crystals, and she always ended up stuck in the police station until the boss and the landlord came to pick her up. So, without thinking twice, Jahy decided to make a run for it. She wasn't going to let them detain her again, but unfortunately, she wasn't able to escape and got caught. At the police station, Jahy tried to come up with a believable excuse, claiming she ran because she was tired and wanted to get home faster. The officer found it strange, though, as she was sprinting like a maniac. Jahy remembered the landlord's threat of killing her if she got caught again, so she begged the officer not to call the landlord but to call her boss instead. The phone rang, and the officer explained that they had detained a strange person, but then he was told the strange person was actually in the park, dressed like a magical girl. Jahy's eyes widened as she realized this might be the magical girl who destroyed the Dark Realm. She insisted that the officer capture the magical girl, but since he couldn't understand why, she decided to take matters into her own hands. Jahy went to the park, ready to confront the magical girl, but she was shocked to find out that it was actually a dude dressed as a magical girl. The police started questioning him and eventually detained him. Back at the police station, Jahy was still reeling from what she had witnessed, and the officer had already called the boss and the landlord to come pick her up. The next day, Jahy was getting ready for work when the landlord called in sick. She told Jahy that her sister was sick too, so the pub would be closed for the night. Jahy couldn't help but laugh at the landlord's weakness for catching a simple cold and mockingly proclaimed how much better she was. But the landlord warned her that she would also catch a cold if she kept dressing so poorly. Jahy brushed it off, thinking it was nonsense. However, the next day, she woke up with a sore throat and a dry feeling. She started to realize that she might be sick. Back in the Dark Realm, she never got sick because only those with weak magical powers could catch an illness. So she wondered if she had become weaker or if it was just because of her fashion choices. Lying in bed, Jahy couldn't help but cry as she reminisced about her good life in the Dark Realm, full of power, authority, and no weakness. Now she felt weak, powerless, and all alone. She even worried that if her assistant, Dojima, saw her like this, she would abandon her too. The next morning, Jahy woke up to find the boss in her place, cooking rice porridge for her. Apparently, Jahy hadn't been opening her door, so the boss used the landlord's spare key to let herself in. The landlord also showed up, bringing some medicine, but as she made fun of Jahy's appearance, Jahy got annoyed and chased them away. Just as she settled down, someone knocked on the door. Jahy assumed it was the boss or the landlord, forgetting something again. But to her surprise, it was the magical girl from before. Jahy couldn't understand why she was there. Thinking quickly, Jahy decided to launch a surprise attack, but she was easily pushed back. The magical girl demanded that Jahy hand over the mana crystal, but Jahy wasn't willing to give it up. Just when things were getting intense, the landlord returned, saw the situation, and came to Jahy's rescue. She called the police, and the magical girl was taken away. While crying, Jahy tried to save face and claimed that she wasn't scared and could have defeated the magical girl herself. But deep down, she was terrified of losing her precious crystal and meeting her demise. The landlord assured her that the magical girl wouldn't be bothering them anytime soon and stayed with Jahy until she fell asleep. In her dreams, Jahy defeated the magical girl and felt a sense of victory.